Fear, hell and control. How religion weaponizes terror and how to break free when faith feels like terror. A child lies awake in the dark. The house is quiet, but their mind is not. Somewhere in the shadows of their room, they imagine a demon waiting. Somewhere beneath the floor, they picture a place of fire where bad people scream forever. YouTube. They have been told that God is love, but tonight, what they feel most is fear. Across the world, many religious traditions teach that there is more to life than what we see, that there is judgment, heaven, hell, angels, demons. For many people, these ideas bring comfort and meaning. For others, they become a source of lifelong terror. YouTube +1. This episode is about that terror, how fear of hell, demons, sin, and the end of the world is used as a tool of control, how believers and ex-believers from different religions describe its effects, and how some thinkers, including modern Gnostic voices, see fear itself as a weapon of unseen forces they call archons.mormon stories +5 YouTube. This is not an attack on sincere faith. It is an investigation into what happens when fear becomes the loudest voice in religion. The machinery of religious fear. Fear is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. In the right dose, it keeps us alive. Stop at the cliff edge, don't walk into traffic. But in the wrong hands, it can become a way to shape behavior, limit questions, and hold people in place. YouTube. In many religious contexts, fear appears in four main forms. First, fear of punishment, the idea of hell, eternal conscious torment, or divine wrath poured out on those who disobey or disbelieve. YouTube. Second, fear of exclusion, losing your community, your family, or your place in heaven if you step out of line. YouTube. Third, fear of spiritual danger, demons, jinn, curses, evil spirits, or unseen enemies ready to pounce if you don't follow the rules exactly. YouTube. Fourth, fear of existential failure, missing God's plan, being lukewarm, or disappointing a deity who is watching your every thought. YouTube psychologists point out that chronic fear narrows our perception and makes us more compliant. Under stress, we default to authority figures, follow instructions, and suppress doubt because questioning feels dangerous. YouTube. In a religious setting, this can create a loop. Messages that emphasize danger and sin increase fear. Fear drives people to cling tighter to the same authority that frightened them. Temporary relief feels like proof that the authority is right. Then the cycle begins again. YouTube. In this episode, we'll watch how that cycle plays out in specific doctrines, from Catholic ideas about unbaptized children, to Mormon expectations and ex-Mormon trauma, to Muslim and Anglican experiences of hell and punishment. Wikipedia +5 YouTube. We'll also ask a deeper question. If fear is a kind of frequency, who or what feeds on it? Hell, limbo, and children, the Catholic and Christian shadow. Few ideas are as terrifying as eternal punishment. In many Christian traditions, hell is presented as a place or state of endless suffering, separation from God, or conscious torment. Preachers describe flames, darkness, weeping, and gnashing of teeth. Whole evangelistic strategies have been built around the question, if you died tonight, where would you go? YouTube within Catholicism, alongside the hope of heaven and the reality of purgatory. There has been a long and complex conversation about what happens to those who die without baptism, especially infants, Catholic. For centuries, many Catholic theologians proposed the idea of limbo, a state where unbaptized infants, though free from the pains of hell, would not enjoy the full vision of God's glory. This was never defined as strict dogma, but it became a widespread belief, shaping how ordinary Catholics imagined the fate of children who died before they could be baptized. Catholic pastoral writers have noted how this teaching, or even the fear of it, caused intense anguish for parents. The thought that a child might be forever on the outside of heaven, not in torment, but never fully embraced, was almost unbearable. Catholic. In recent decades, official Catholic documents have emphasized that limbo was a theological hypothesis, not a defined article of faith, and that there are strong reasons to hope in God's mercy for unbaptized infants. Some theologians now speak openly of entrusting these children to a loving God who desires all to be saved. Yet the emotional residue of older ideas remains. Many ex-Catholics describe growing up with a sense that God's grace could be lost easily, that missing a sacrament, committing a mortal sin, or dying in the wrong state could mean disaster. Beyond Catholicism, other Christian communities also use the fear of hell as a central motivator, sometimes explicitly in sermons and media, sometimes implicitly in family conversations and youth groups. YouTube +1. For a child, the difference between God loves you and God loves you, but will burn you forever if you do X, can be the difference between security and trauma. The doctrine may be framed as justice. The experience, for many, is terror. Ex-Mormons, ex-Muslims, ex-Catholics and Anglicans, stories of fear. Narrator: when you listen to people who have left high-demand religions, certain patterns repeat, different scriptures, different rituals, but similar fear. In the Latter-day Saint world, for example, the podcast Mormon Stories has spent years interviewing current and former members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Guests describe mission trauma, intense pressure to conform, and deep fear about what will happen if they doubt or leave. Some ex-Mormons talk about growing up with the idea that questioning church authority could threaten their place in the celestial kingdom, their eternal family, or their worthiness as a missionary. Others describe shame around sexuality, modesty, and obedience, reinforced by teachings about eternal consequences. Creators like Alyssa Grenfell, an ex-Mormon author and commentator, share how breaking away from a fear-based, perfectionistic system can feel like stepping off a cliff, risking not just social rejection, but damnation, according to what they were taught as children. In Muslim contexts, ex-Muslim voices often describe fear of hell and fear of apostasy as central to their experience. Fear of Jahannam, Islamic hell, fear of divine anger, fear of family and community consequences if they stop believing. In some cultural settings, leaving the faith is not just a spiritual concern, but a physical danger. Again, this is not the only face of Islam. For many, Islam is a source of peace, justice, and structure. But for those who tell their stories on ex-Muslim channels and forums, fear is front and center. Fear of what happens in the grave, fear of angels recording every misstep, fear of violating rules that carry eternal penalties. Among ex-Catholic and ex-Anglican Christians, a similar pattern appears. Some recall constant anxiety about mortal sin, confession, and whether they were worthy to approach the Eucharist. Others describe church rules versus real faith, where institutional demands overshadowed any sense of love or inner transformation. Across these different traditions, one theme emerges. When fear becomes the core of religious life, people may obey, but often at the cost of mental health, honest questioning, and genuine connection. When they finally step away, they talk about panic attacks, nightmares, and a long process of deprogramming the voice that says, if you stop being afraid, God will punish you. Mormon stories +2. These stories do not represent every believer, but they show what can happen when fear is not just a warning, but a cage. The fear cycle, how terror keeps systems intact. If we step back from any one religion and look at the patterns, we can see a kind of fear cycle at work. It often begins with a threat, explicit or implied messages about hell, divine punishment, demonic attack, or social exile. The believer experiences anxiety. What if I get this wrong? What if I think the wrong thoughts? What if I sin without realizing it? In that anxious state, they turn to religious authorities for guidance and reassurance. The system offers obedience as the cure. Follow these rules, believe these doctrines, attend these meetings, give this money, submit to this leadership. When they comply, they experience temporary relief. They feel safe for now. The preacher's words become less frightening when you are on the inside. The community's approval feels like a shield, but soon a new threat arises. A fresh sermon on end times, a warning about sin, a reminder that even saved people can fall away. And the cycle begins again. This loop can become so normal that it feels like just what religion is. In some congregations, leaders may sincerely believe that they are helping people by keeping them alert and on fire through fear. In others, fear becomes a conscious or unconscious way to keep control, to make questioning feel like rebellion and leaving feel like suicide. Meanwhile, the believer's nervous system never fully relaxes. Their spirituality is wired to chronic vigilance. Their image of the divine is fused with the worst human experiences of threat and disappointment. At this point, some thinkers suggest that something more than human psychology may be at work. Archons and the frequency of fear. In episode 1 of Church in Shadow, we explored the work of John Lamb Lash, a contemporary interpreter of Gnostic myth. According to his reading, humanity is not alone in consciousness. We are surrounded by other intelligences, some of which he calls archons. In his reconstruction of ancient Gnostic texts, archons are parasitic, imitative beings generated by a flawed cosmic act. They cannot create life in the way true divinity can, so they attempt to counterfeit and corrupt. They push illusions, false narratives, and counterfeit spirituality to distract humanity from its deeper connection to the living earth and to the wisdom figure known as Sophia. Lash suggests that archons influence human systems, religions, governments, even technologies, by amplifying fear, confusion, and servile obedience. Their goal in this mythic reading is not to nurture humanity, but to feed off our disorientation. From this perspective, fear-based religion is not simply a human mistake or a historical accident. It becomes part of a larger pattern of archontic control. Keep people terrified of divine punishment, obsessed with sin and impurity, and they will be less able to sense their own innate connection to the sacred and to the earth. In this myth, if you are constantly terrified of hell, you might never notice that you are already living in a kind of spiritual prison, constructed from inherited ideas, psychological conditioning, and perhaps, in Lash's view, non-human interference. Whether you take this literally or metaphorically, It offers a powerful image, fear as a frequency. The more time we spend in it, the more we tune our consciousness to channels that limit us. The more we pass it on to children in the name of God, the more we replicate the very structures that keep us small. Understood this way, stepping out of fear-based religion is not just a psychological act. It is, in the language of Gnosis, an act of rebellion against archontic control.
Hey everyone, morning. Mind if I join you? Not at all. We were just checking the map before.
Breaking the fear spell. For those who grew up in systems where fear was normal, loosening its grip can be slow and painful, but thousands of ex-believers are doing exactly that. Many describe a similar process. First, naming the fear, writing down the specific phrases that haunt them. If I leave this church, God will abandon me. If I doubt, I will burn forever. If my child dies unbaptized, they won't be in heaven. Seeing these statements on paper helps reveal them as scripts, not absolute truths. Mormon stories plus 2 seconds, learning about how fear works in the brain and body. Understanding panic attacks, religious trauma, and scrupulosity, sometimes called religious OCD, can turn mysterious dread into something understandable and treatable. Third, hearing other stories. Podcasts and channels like Mormon Stories, ex-Christian and ex-Muslim platforms, and creators such as Alyssa Grenfell provide a mirror. I am not the only one who felt this. I am not the only one who was told that leaving equals damnation. YouTube plus 3/4, finding new forms of community, support groups, therapy, online forums, or small circles of friends willing to ask questions without threatening each other. For some, this is still religious or spiritual. For others, it is secular. The key is that belonging no longer depends on being afraid. Wikipedia plus 2. Finally, reimagining the sacred, or letting it go. Some former believers moved toward a more universalist or mystical view of the divine, one that rejects eternal torture as incompatible with love. Others embrace a secular, humanist ethic and focus on this life alone. In each case, the central move is the same: stepping out of relationships, whether with churches, doctrines, or imagined beings, that demand fear as the price of safety. Whose fear is this? Fear can be a teacher. It can warn us of real danger, help us set boundaries, and tell us when something is wrong. But when fear becomes the main language of religion, when children lie awake terrified of hell, when adults stay in harmful communities because they're afraid to leave, when entire societies are steered by apocalyptic panic, something has gone very wrong. For some, that something is human: trauma, control, politics, and money. For others, it is archontic, a deeper pattern of deception that feeds on the energy of fear itself. Wherever you land, one question remains. When you feel fear around God, sin, or eternity, whose fear is this? Is it the voice of your own deepest knowing? Or is it someone else's story, handed to you by parents, preachers, institutions, or perhaps, if the Gnostics are right, forces that do not have your growth at heart? The work of church and shadow is not to take away your faith, but to invite you to examine the structures around it, to see where fear is manufactured, how it is used, and what becomes possible when you step beyond it. In the end, a spirituality worth having does not demand that you stay afraid. It invites you to walk carefully, honestly, sometimes trembling, out of the cages built for you, into a life where love and truth no longer need terror to keep you close.